Alexander Bulkin is here from New York. Yeah, he's been in this space for a long time, investigating what I think is a very new an area of economics, and this is incredibly fun to do because it has a lot of game theory. I think that also was one of the key elements I take from your token design. And if we have to design tokens that interact with complex ecosystems such as supply chain, then we have to understand this economics. So Alex, please tell us more. A warm hand of applause, please.
Thank you, Rutger. Hi, everybody. I come from New York. I'm a co-founder of Coin Fund, which is a advisory company and an investment company that's been working in blockchain since 2015. We're a multidisciplinary team of people. I have... Okay. Thank you. We're a multidisciplinary team of people. We have people who are in finance and economics. I'm a technologist with a second degree in social sciences, and we love doing what we're doing. Scott started talking about what SweetBridge is doing, and it's a great case study of what I'm going to talk about, which is basically the concept of tokens and crypto economics is very broad and really powerful in many ways. Essentially, when you deal with blockchain, you're dealing with obligations that are assured automatically in some cases, not all of them, of course. So in traditional finance, the situation that you have is when somebody is obligated to pay somebody else, they have to physically go and initiate a payment in some form. And there has to be all the structures in place for reasons of trust to ensure that people, in fact, fulfill their obligations, not break laws, not steal the money, and so on. In blockchain, there is a large subset of actions that can be performed completely automatically, like Scott was saying with discounts, for example, where the expense, the cost of ensuring that obligations get fulfilled basically goes down to zero. And if you think what that means, you will see that the efficiency of the financial and economic system based on blockchain will consequently significantly improve as compared to what we have today. Tokens, programmable money, again, Scott was talking about the incentives for users and customers to stay within your ecosystem, for example, and use your services. We think of that as programmable money is more, huh? Okay. As programmable money being the same as programmable crowd, and sort of not in a bad way, because I think you can incentivize people. You can't make people do things, but you can incentivize people to do things that are beneficial. When you shift the incentives from investors to users, like again Scott was describing in his presentation, you shift the incentives and you align the incentives between multiple players in the ecosystem, which creates a completely new atmosphere behind your product. It's a social phenomenon, and it's a little bit hard to understand economically, but if you think about it, what does it mean for users of Facebook to own Facebook? It would be a completely different product, right? I'm going to go a little faster. So crypto economics, how do you program a crowd? If you don't have to, don't. because it's hard, it's involved, you have to think a lot, you have to, and essentially, what we think when we look at crypto economics is basically, trying to design a token-based blockchain system is a little bit like trying to design an atomic bomb in your garage. So be careful and think and make sure you understand what you're doing. But what is really crypto economics? Well, I already talked about obligations that can get fulfilled automatically on the blockchain. That's strong consistency guarantees means things like I can't spend the same money twice. You know, those are easy to understand. Assets that are programmable and transferable that can encode rights or licenses. And then what's even more interesting going forward is things that act on your behalf but are enabled with economic value. So an easy example of that is an exchange trading strategy, which you can send to the exchange along with the money that it can then spend to buy the asset that you want to buy on the exchange according to your specifications. Think about, let's say you wanted to, by the way, some systems today already do this, like Priceline, for example, allows you to specify how you want to travel and it will pick the flight for you. You know, with blockchain, you can do the same with more trust and more security and have potentially more complicated strategies that you can then inject that can act on your behalf. We're barely touching the surface as to what that would really mean in terms of our everyday experience. But I think it's a really powerful idea because it allows, most important reason why it is so powerful is because it allows a group of people to achieve consensus even without really communicating directly, but on the basis of their digital representative components. So that's also part of crypto economics. So I hope you can read it. It's tiny. So designing crypto economics, I want to talk a little bit about how we think about designing a token. Okay, because people, you know, some people in this audience are going to actually face this question about what do you do, how do you approach it in a kind of structured way, right? And the answer is it is actually an art, not so much a science, but it's also a little bit of a science, and you can guide your, just kind of like the same way you can learn art, you can also learn crypto economic design from some guidelines that are not very complicated. And you start by basically understanding the business context of where you want your system to function and how. And to understand that the context of your business, you look at everybody who is part of your economic ecosystem. This is really, really important to understand who the people are that will interact with your system in any way. And you have to think one step further than traditional businesses, because with tokens, you have to think about ecosystem participants that are only coming in contact with token, but not sometimes directly your product. For example, they're buying your token on exchanges and holding them. Who knows what else they might think of doing. So you have to look at the community of users and people that interact with your system. And then you have to think of your system as sort of a counterpart to that, and think about what your system will, what sort of value it will bring to the people in the ecosystem. Maybe different value for different people, who knows? And then what does the network need to do it? So if you think about Bitcoin, for example, which is a pretty simple crypto economic system, despite it being simple, it's not actually trivial. You think that, so Bitcoin requires compute cycles to be stable. And in order to buy these compute cycles, Bitcoin will pay the miners with tokens to incentivize them to provide the compute cycles it need. Digital money is not actually a new idea. People think that innovation of Bitcoin is proof of work that allows distributed consensus. That's actually manifestly not true. The innovation of Bitcoin is the stability that underlies it through miner incentives. You take away minor incentives, it doesn't matter that proof of work is there. The system is going to fall apart. So those 3 points, those first 4 points are critically important. Before the token ever comes in, you have to understand who, what do they need, what do you need to do that for them, and under what conditions is the entire system stable. And I'm not talking economically, like what would be a smooth way for it to operate? And then you translate those points into the token behavior. So, for example, when you think about participants and the services that they need to receive from your network, you immediately translate it into the token demand. So what are the tokens useful for? And that is a completely critical question. It's really important to, like Scott's presentation and the discount token framework is really powerful in that it allows to calculate the intrinsic value of tokens based on their future utility. That is ideal. It doesn't always happen. In some cases, you fudge it or don't know what it is exactly. But the better you know it, the better you can say, well, this is what will give my tokens value. This is what will make people want to basically buy them at ICO and then use them when the ecosystem is operational. And just to be clear, discount tokens are a great model, but there's a few more possibilities that have sort of emerged in the space over the years, which are very different. You know, they're currency tokens, which will say, well, I'm issuing the token that will be accepted as a currency for this particular purpose. And we are now watching some of these projects come into this space, and we will sort of know more about how well that works, because we don't yet. It's actually funny, you know, with how big the blockchain space is, there aren't that many actually operating projects in blockchain. Just not a lot. So over time, we'll learn what that means. What creates supply of tokens? In Bitcoin, you know, creating a token supply is an answer to, you know, that fourth question. You know, what are the services the network needs to buy? You know, a supply of tokens can't just come out of nowhere to everybody. It's better to channel it where that brings the most value to the network. So in Bitcoin, token supply comes from, you know, by paying miners for their services. What are the inflation and supply dynamics? Does the supply sometimes diminish for any reason, or does it increase? How do you look at the broader structure? And I highly recommend, I didn't put it on the slide, but I highly recommend looking at the money supply equation in traditional finance. It's not directly applicable to blockchain, but in a slightly, but it will help you understand sort of how money moves. And not all tokens are money, so that there's a caveat there. But when you think of inflation and supply and the ecosystem of your application, you know, it's really useful to have the basics of sort of the value of money, monetary economics, just to familiarize yourself with it. And do they have intrinsic value? You know, it's very easy to imagine tokens with intrinsic value. You open a coffee shop and you pre-sell, you know, $5 gift cards, each worth 1 cup of coffee. That's a token with a value. It's not that hard. And there's a broad spectrum of ideas from very clear value like that to, you know, something like a discount token, which is also clear, but kind of fluctuates based on how network behaves, to pure cryptocurrencies, which don't have any intrinsic value whatsoever. And I know a lot of people will argue with me, but I will usually just walk away if that happens. And these are very interesting ideas. It's like, you know, creating an economics in your garage is not that different. It's kind of like creating an atomic bomb in your garage, creating an economics in your garage. It's, you know, an interesting experiment. You know, then there is the question of incentives around the ecosystem, who gets tokens, and so on. And then, you know, tokens are programmable money, so you can program all kinds of things. You can program value moving from one place to another, or you can program tokens that sometimes just disappear in response to some events, or you can program tokens that generate other tokens in your account in response to some other events. So, you know, these are possibilities, and whoever is looking at designing their crypto economics, there's a few projects to look at. I should have actually made the list. Maybe I'll send it to Rutger by email later, of projects that kind of do a good job of illustrating a clear idea. I don't know if it's a good idea or a bad idea, but being familiar with all the ideas in this space is really important. And it's getting harder and harder with time because there's so much going on. And then governance is really, really important because with modern cryptography, you can actually have some very interesting, irrefutable governance models that then become a kind of a de facto recourse system in this ecosystem that you're building. And so, you know, DAOs and all kinds of other ideas for alternative organizing models come out of that. And the crowd sale structuring, which I'm probably going to skip. This is an interesting one. I love it. Well, common cryptoeconomic bugs, because we constantly evaluate projects, and I can usually tell whether somebody has actually sat down and thought about the problem for a sufficient amount of time or not in like the first 5 minutes. It's quite easy, but sometimes there's like very obvious things that are wrong really fundamentally with how people think. I'm not going to go in this order I have on the screen because, you know, the incorrect social assumptions is a huge one. Wikipedia, no, I'm sorry, unnecessary economic incentives. Wikipedia is already a decentralized organization. It functions great. People have tried to create economically enabled Wikipedia many times. Every one of those efforts has failed. And people keep trying, and it will fail again. Because human incentives are not necessarily economic. And if you forget that, you're not going to be able to create a good economy, because putting the economy where just human decency suffices doesn't work. Incorrect social assumptions. We will battle fake news by voting. Who sees a problem with that statement? Good. Value does not come from nowhere. You would think that people would understand what makes cryptocurrency valuable, and it's not always universally the case. Sometimes people say things like, we will give people points in the form of tokens. And then I say, well, what are the points used for? And they're like, well, they're points. You give them to people. If you give something to somebody, it's not necessarily valuable. It's only valuable if that person wants it. It's subtle. You know, gameability is what people think about a lot, but it's notoriously hard, especially in the crowd sale structures. Crowd sale investors will come in and will try to extract as much value as possible. Simple example, a crowd sale in the form of an auction, which has a, you know, the price of a token being defined by how many people come in and how much money they put into the entire crowd sale. what's going to happen is nobody's going to put anything in until the very last second of the crowd sale. It's a bad idea. People will find a way to game, hack, and that's partly what makes it so much fun, but also, again, you have to be kind of careful. Enjoy.